Hey friends, welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name's Ashley Ariana, and wow, what a humiliating loss for the 49ers. And honestly, there's nothing humiliating necessarily about losing to the Detroit Lions. I think most fans anticipated a loss, even a blowout loss. But actually, the loss that they ended up having seemed to be worse because they showed heart and fight throughout the first half, even the first 3 quarters, and then had a 4th quarter breakdown, which has been very on par for how they've played this entire season. Um, just a complete collapse. It felt like in the beginning half, we weren't watching the 49ers. We were watching a team that was spreading the ball around. On offense, they had misdirection, they had play action rollout, they were getting rookies involved. Defensively, they also didn't look the same. They really struggled on defense. Now, obviously, the Lions are a very high-powered offense, but it was just interesting watching how they played in the first 3 quarters. Kyle being creative. I don't know, maybe he heard some of the Ben Johnson rumors, heard Kyle or heard fans um, asking, or suggesting if he should be replaced by Ben Johnson. We saw a ton of creativity on the Lions offense. But yeah, I think it was almost worse that the 49ers showed heart, they showed fight, the players showed up to play, and then they still collapsed at the end. And it wasn't necessarily because the Lions, played or was like a much more talented team. The Lions were really struggling, specifically on defense. I'm interested. I was kind of, with the 49ers being out of it, I feel like the Lions are an underdog. I was kind of like, oh, well, if they end up going to, the playoffs, maybe that'll be a team that I kind of root for the underdog story about. While the 49ers aren't in it, obviously this game I wanted the 49ers to win. But watching them today, I was like, those injuries have caught up to the Lions. On defense, they looked horrible. Or the 49ers just looked, much better on offense than they have all year. But I can't help but notice that the 2 games this season, the 49ers offensively have looked dominant, have came from the Bears, whose defense absolutely sucks, and the Lions, who have the worst ranked defense in the league now that they're now missing 15 players on defense, including their entire starting defensive line. Um, Also their running back, but we'll get into that. They did not go away from the run, which is something that Kyle did do, which is a shame. But yeah, so before we break down the game, I think what sucks is for the most part of the second half, I thought that the story was going to be about Brock Purdy, about his interceptions, and really, and Jake Moody as well, but really Brock Purdy crumbling in the 4th quarter. Can we pay him? Can we not? And we will get to that. But unfortunately, before we get to that, we have to talk about the fact that Brock Purdy was injured. I can't believe this is happening. It feels like deja vu all over again. I have some quotes from Brock Purdy and from Kyle. So basically, if you guys didn't see at the very end, after his, almost interception, followed by a pick, followed by a missed field goal, followed by another interception. By the way, horrible sequence of plays right there for the 49ers. He tried to Brock Purdy tried to throw an interception to Kirby Joseph, got called back for offense or for defensive pass interference. 49ers get the ball again. He throws another interception straight to Kirby Joseph. That one obviously counts. Lions get down, they go score. 49ers come back, they drive all the way down the field. They can't get it in the end zone. They trust Jake Moody. Kyle trusts Jake Moody. We'll get into Kyle giving Jake Moody a vote of confidence as well. But they trust him to kick a field goal. They miss the field goal, give the ball back to the Lions. Eventually, the ball comes back, and then Brock Purdy in the 4th quarter, game on the line, absolutely have to have it, throws another interception. What the hell? So then they're down 12 points. 49ers are down 12 points after leading, by the way. All the way up until the 4th quarter, 49ers were winning this game. Going into this game, I thought the 49ers were going to be down, 20 going into the 2nd quarter, but they weren't. They were winning. They were beating the Lions. And that in some ways makes it worse. But at the very end, about 2 minutes left, a little bit over 2 minutes, 49ers are down a little bit under 2 minutes, sorry. Brock Purdy threw an interception at 2 minutes and 37 seconds. But a little bit after that, Brock Purdy's in the game. They're down 12 points. There's seemingly no way of winning at this point. And Brock Purdy is hit. Now, they replayed the hit a couple times, and I couldn't figure out exactly where it happened, but Brock Purdy ends up trying to throw the ball. He leaves the game. He's on the sideline. You can see the camera panning over to him. He's trying to throw. He's asked about it after the game, or first Kyle was asked about it after the game, said that they think that he hit a nerve and that his arm went numb and felt like it was on fire. By the way, this is his throwing hand. At first it looked like a wrist, but when Kyle and Brock talked about it, they talked about the entire arm/elbow area. That elbow, by the way, that was surgically repaired, his throwing elbow. When after the game, you know, you go, good game, good game, good game. Brock Purdy was shaking hands with his left hand. So he was not using his throwing hand to shake hands with anyone. After Kyle Shanahan talks, he says that they think that Brock Purdy hit a nerve, that it went numb and felt like it was on fire, and that he could not throw a football. They did some tests. We'll get into what Brock Purdy said, but they're going to do more imaging tomorrow, and Brock Purdy is questionable for the Cardinals game. I'm anticipating that they probably will not play him week 18 against the Cardinals. Although Brock Purdy did say if he can, he wants to go. He's up for a big ass contract extension. Right before those interceptions, the announcers, Collinsworth and was it Troy Aikman, they were talking, and both of them were talking about Brock Purdy being the $60 million man. And for the most part, up until the interceptions, I think he threw 3 touchdowns. So they were saying, you know, that's market value. That's what he's going to be asking for. Then bam, 2 interceptions and then an injury. And for a lot of you who have been watching my channel for a while, I've been curious if Brock Purdy has been injured since a few weeks ago when he missed a game with that arm, you know, elbow soreness that people were really minimizing, because in my opinion, his balls have had far less zip on them. He hasn't ever had like the strongest arm ever. He's been able to like throw down the field consistently, but like the zip, the speed in which he can like throw it in there, that comes from arm strength. And he's never had a ton of that, but to me, his balls had looked even weaker. But just this week, I think it was Grant Cohn during the press conference asked Brock Purdy, is your arm healthy enough to play, or is it 100% healthy? Trying to kind of clarify, because we know, you know, Kyle says Fred Warner's healthy, but then Fred Warner came out and said, well, I have a broken bone in my foot. I'm just healthy enough to play. So the reporters were doing a good job clarifying with Brock Purdy, hey, is this something that you can play through, but it's hurting you and that might be affecting your play? Or are you all good? Brock Purdy said, I'm 100% healthy. So I don't know if he feels like for his contract extension that he, you know, it looks worse. Maybe he loses more money if he's injured because now he has an injury history. But if he, you know, was actually 100% healthy, then A, that looks bad because why all of a sudden do you suck now? And then B, if he was 100% healthy, he's surely not now. So like I said, Kyle Shanahan, do I have the direct quote? Brock Purdy has a nerve issue in his surgically repaired right elbow. So not good. We don't love a nerve issue in your throwing elbow. Doesn't sound good considering he's already had a full reconstruction on that elbow and also has had a shoulder injury separate than the elbow on his throwing arm this season. So that's very bad. Then Purdy was asked about it. He said, it doesn't feel the best. I got hit. My arm felt like it was on fire. Not numb, but on fire. I tried throwing on the sideline and I couldn't move it. So when he talked about he couldn't move his arm, if you guys remember when he hurt that UCL, which is that elbow, he said that he wasn't able to lift, like his arm was dead. He wasn't able to move his elbow. So Eric Branch picking up on Brock Purdy saying my arm was on fire. and I could not throw the ball. Eric Branch said, um, is this comparable to what happened in Philadelphia when he, got that elbow injury? And Brock said a little bit, but we did UCL tests and it said I'm good. So we'll have to see in the imaging tomorrow. He also, by the way, just to clarify, he made a point to clarify this, so I should say it. He said, I would never tap out of a game. I love my teammates. I'm going to go down winning or losing till the bitter end. I want to play. He clarified that if the imaging comes back and he's able to move his arm, that he wants to play against the Cardinals, that he would never have left a game early. Talked about the love of the game, that's not what he's made of. That's not his character. I do believe Brock Purdy. If you guys remember that Philadelphia game, he actually continued to play with his UCL like not working because the backup there was like no backup quarterback after Josh Johnson also got hurt. And so he like could not throw the ball and was still out there. Brock Purdy has played through rib injuries. He played through that shoulder soreness injury that he had. Now, something that I am curious about, because he says, they're going to have to do more imaging tomorrow. If you remember with that shoulder injury earlier this year, Purdy missed one game and Kyle was asked about it. And apparently on the imaging, it came back that nothing was broken. On the MRI, there was no muscle tear or strain. And so Kyle was kind of like, I don't know what's wrong. I don't know why he's not playing. And Purdy was like, I can't move my shoulder. My shoulder's in crazy pain. So what that tells, like, that scares me when you think about giving Purdy 60 million, even 40 million, like any amount of money guaranteed long term. If he has reoccurring, like it's been 1 year since his reconstruction surgery, if he has reoccurring issues with his throwing arm, like you don't want to lock a guy up. Which is honestly why I think he was trying to play through that shoulder injury earlier. But yeah, really screwed himself at the very end there. Not that it was it wasn't his fault. The offensive line kind of broke down. Actually, after playing a really good game, I felt like this was one of the better offensive line games this year, which was interesting because there was a ton of backups playing. But maybe, Kyle, he's not the best judge of character. Maybe some of those backups are actually better than the starters. I think, Ben Barch, they had Nick Zakel in there. I think some of those guys were playing much better than Aaron Banks was playing. I think they are going to be moving on from Aaron Banks this year because his rookie deal is up, and I don't think they're going to want to pay him. But honestly, I was feeling pretty good about the offensive line. Not that it was, I'm not saying they need to draft offensive line. Like it is a huge issue, but for the fact that it was, all third, fourth string offensive linemen, I thought they held up fairly well against the Lions. Now the Lions do have a really bad defense, so I don't know, maybe that evens it out a little bit. But that's for Purdy and Purdy's injury. I'm gonna look at the comments really quick before I break down the actual game and get into it. Is my dad watching? I don't see his comment. Anyways, Daddy, if you're watching, I love you. Kyle and John's seat went from warm to hot. Something I found interesting when Brock Purdy threw the first interception, the camera panned over to Kyle, and Kyle went like made a big thing with his face, and then took his play sheet and covered his mouth, but would bring it down a little bit so you could see that he was like swearing at Brock Purdy. And then the second interception, the camera panned up to John Lynch, who stood up and then went like this. So they showed both Kyle and John Lynch like really, I mean, they know the camera's on them, like really strongly reacting to Brock Purdy's interceptions and also to Jake Moody. Now, what I would say about Jake Moody, for Kyle, who went like, what the fuck or whatever, and then also John Lynch like stood up and like he had some papers on his desk and threw it, yeah, very extremely animated. Sorry, apparently I can't speak. But what I would say about them doing that to Jake Moody is Jake Moody sucked his rookie year. He sucked during the regular season. He sucked during the playoffs. He missed a Super Bowl kick. Like, You guys chose to bring him back. Even once he went down with his um with his high ankle sprain that he had earlier this year, off the couch they had Andreas Carlson, who by the way is kicking for like the Packers right now, making all their kicks. But they got him off the couch and he made 5 kicks in a row. Like it would have been easy for them to say, "Oh, they could have they didn't have to take accountability for Jake Moody sucking. They could have just said, "Oh, Jake Moody, he's still healing from his uh ankle, so we're gonna stick with Carlson for now. But we still believe in Jake long term." They could have done something like that if they didn't want to throw Jake Moody under the bus right away. But instead, they had him back. He missed 2 field goals today, by the way. Then he missed an extra point. Then at the very end, the onside kick was the worst onside. Somehow, the onside kick was like worse than both of the missed field goals and the extra point. Even more embarrassing than that, earlier this week, when asked about Jake Moody, because he stunk it up last week too, Kyle Shanahan said, "We believe in him. We're not moving off of him. He has my full confidence." Stood 100% behind Jake Moody, which I think is, I mean, they lost by 7 points, right? The final score was 40, where is it? 40-34. Yeah, so they lost by 6 points. Jake Moody missed 2 field goals and an extra point. If Jake Moody makes his kicks, the 49ers win that football game. And there's been, I mean, that goes for the Tampa game, wouldn't have gone to overtime if Jake Moody didn't miss it. There's multiple games this year that if Jake Moody makes his kicks, the 49ers win. If you go back to the most important game last year, if Jake Moody makes his kicks in the Super Bowl, they never go to overtime. They win that game. So to me, it's absolutely bonkers that the 49ers have kept Jake Moody around for this long. I don't know what, like, to me, it sends a message to your team. If you cut Jake Moody, like, we're not about us. We're not about our ego. We don't care that we spent a 3rd-round pick on you. If you're not performing, Jesus says that game was not close. It was definitely close until the 4th quarter. I mean, the 49ers were winning. I think that's like the worst part about it. I expected it to not be close, and I actually think that would have felt better. Sorry, not to get off track, but I just read that. Really quickly, let me see. How can you say Niners win versus Lions? Lions were easily moving the ball near the end zone. I completely agree. The 49ers defense absolutely sucked. The Lions defense also sucked. And the 49ers were winning all the way up until the 4th quarter. So, yeah. I mean, I think we're going to get into it. I have a whole segment on Nick Sorensen and the defense. The defense was horrible. I was just I honestly thought that the offense was going to look worse and the defense wouldn't do too well because the Lions are the number 1 rated offense in the league right now. So I thought the 49ers were going to be like losing by 20 all game, and the final score was going to be like 50-17. So I think what was worse was that the 49ers did come out scoring and kind of able to keep up. And then the defense let them down at the very end. And then the offense started crumbling. Purdy started turning the ball over. And that was actually, in my opinion, a worse way to lose because it like really highlighted why they, everything that they've struggled with all year, I guess, except for the red zone issues because they were able to score. But even that, like, once, like, the Lions defense also sucks, so I have a hard time knowing, was the 49ers offense way better or was the 49ers just going against a really bad defense? See, but then on 27 says, I like that John Lynch pounded the table when Brock threw them picks. He did like make a performance out of being angry about Brock. So maybe that's don't pay him 60 million, like do not get done with this Arizona Cardinals game and then have an announcement that the 49ers just locked Brock Purdy up to a 5-year deal for 150 million guaranteed, 375 million over 4 years. Like, do not do that shit. And if you do, like, don't get fucking mad when your franchise is the Dallas Cowboys, because that's what they did. You know what I mean? They locked up a mediocre to good quarterback. Like Brock Purdy has some good elements, but when he needs to be clutch, he's absolutely not clutch. Do I have I mean, and neither, by the way, I'm going really hard on Brock Purdy. I have some more stats for Brock Purdy that I want to say, so it's going to sound like I'm picking on him, but I also have some for Kyle Shanahan. This one's Kyle. Okay, Brock Purdy. So Brock Purdy went down anywhere from 1 to 8 points when entering the fourth quarter or in overtime in the regular season or in the playoffs. So if he's down by 8 points or less, he is 41. He's 41 for 72, so a horrible completion percentage for only 502 yards, 3 touchdowns, 7 interceptions, and a 52 passer rating. So in the fourth quarter, the most important quarter, the gotta have it, gotta win. Think about, I mean, the 49ers franchise, Joe Montana, Joe Cool, fourth quarter, even if he's down, he's going to win it at the end. Brock Purdy's the opposite. Brock Purdy has 3 touchdowns in the fourth quarter when losing and 7 interceptions. So in the I have to score a freaking touchdown here moment, Brock Purdy has more than double the amount of interceptions than touchdowns. He really crumbles in the crisis moment. And I think the thing that was most disappointing about this game is like this game didn't even really matter and you're still crumbling. I mean, maybe for him it matters because he feels like, these things are all going to be reflected after, in the postseason when he's asking how much he's going to get paid. But there was seemingly no pressure on this game. And Brock Purdy, I mean, he wants to. My dad and I were texting about this during the game, and Matt Barrows, beat writer for the 49ers, wrote about it. Is Brock Purdy, he starts getting greedy. He puts a lot on himself. And like the things that make Brock Purdy special, the accuracy, the timing, the being able to read defenses, like he doesn't have a strong arm. So he needs to excel in other areas. And that shit goes down the tube when the pressure is on. I mean, he's playing like Jimmy Garoppolo. Jimmy Garoppolo is playing better, like than he is. I mean, in these situations, like at least Jimmy had like kind of a goldfish brain where it felt like he would throw an interception and then be like, da, 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 like he totally forget. Brock Purdy like throws one interception and he starts viral. It's like when you're watching, you can see that he's like sweating. Um, really disappointing by Brock Purdy. Now, I did say that stat that Brock Purdy, like I said, 3 touchdowns, 7 interceptions in the fourth quarter when you have to win. But then Kyle, so before Brock Purdy, just Kyle Shanahan under his tenure with the 49ers. So Kyle and the 49ers, there's 0, meaning they've won 0 games in this scenario, to 44, 0 to 44 when trailing by 8 points going into the fourth quarter. What? That's insane. By the way, he's in like insane company. Let me see. The only coaches since 1991 with a worse record are Dom Capers, who's 0 and 57, and Bobby Ross. I don't even know who these guys are, 0 and 53. But Kyle is third worst out of any coach in the entire NFL. I mean, think about Urban Meyer. Like, think about horrible coaches that were immediately fired, bad NFL coaches. Kyle is third worst since 1991 with 0 and 44. He hasn't won a single game when he's trailing by more than a touchdown going into the fourth quarter. That's fucking crazy. Like, think about the lines. Think about Patrick Mahomes, the Josh Allen, like there's guys that come back from multiple touchdown deficits at least once. At least like usually most teams I think do it 1 to 4 times a season. Kyle has never done it. He's been a coach for the 49ers for going on 8 years. He's never won a game that he was losing by a touchdown. 1 touchdown going into the fourth quarter. So we can rag on Brock Purdy, and he does deserve it. I mean, he's the one that was throwing those interceptions. But whatever Kyle's doing also isn't fucking working. One of the things that Kyle's doing, by the way, is calling 16 passes in a row. Yeah, let me really quickly. Okay, Kyle. Second half, they're winning, and for some reason, he starts calling an unbalanced game. He calls pat at the fourth quarter. They end up falling behind because, like I said, so they're winning, and then Brock throws an intercept or tries to throw an interception. It gets called back, luckily. Then we get another opportunity. Brock actually throws the interception this time. Then the Lions go down and score. Then the 49ers get the ball back. They get all the way down there. They don't score. They give it to Jake Moody. Jake Moody misses a field goal. They give the ball back to the Lions. Lions score again. So bam bam, 49ers go from winning to now they're losing. They're losing by 12. So 49ers are losing by 12. Brock Purdy throws another interception. And then when they get the ball back, every offensive possession after this, Kyle calls 16 passes in a row. So calling a completely unbalanced game. He's not getting the running backs involved. He's not giving those the easy gimme throws to Brock Purdy. Brock Purdy clearly is shaken up at this point. He's thrown multiple interceptions. What does a good offensive coordinator in that position do? They start giving you those Jimmy gimmies, the easy dump off passes to the running back, easy runs, start getting your offense in a flow, getting your quarterback comfortable again, easing them in. Then you start throwing down the field once they feel comfortable again. You don't, as they're spiraling, try to put it all on them. I mean, the whole issue with Brock is that he was putting it all on himself. And so what Kyle should have done is taken a little bit off of Brock Purdy's shoulders, been like, hey, settle in, settle down, made a couple completions, couple first downs, couple easy throws to Ricky Pearsall, to George Kittle, who were killing it all game. In the first half, they were doing this easy peasy, by the way. This isn't something that's like unfamiliar or that's shocking to do. Ben Johnson, the Lions offensive coordinator, was getting their game going. The Lions, who, by the way, were missing their starting running back. Obviously, they have Gibbs, but they were missing Montgomery. And they played a balanced game of run, pass, play action. They had some trick throws in there. Like, Jared Goff is comfortable in that backfield. But no, Kyle Shanahan calls 16 passes in a row. Brock Purdy throws multiple interceptions. He ends up getting hurt behind a terrible offensive line. I felt like Kyle, why does he do this? He crumbles in the end. It's very, very frustrating to see. Also with that, I can't look over, like I said, every time the Lions got the ball, they scored. So Nick Sorensen, earlier this year, much like Jake Moody, who just got a vote of confidence from Kyle also stood by Nick Sorensen, said, Nick Sorensen was dealing with a lot of injuries on that defense, that, he needs a year to kind of work himself in. If you've been watching my channel, I did talk about Robert Saleh really struggled his first year with the 49ers, and then obviously ended up being a great defensive coordinator. So I was thinking maybe, Sorensen just needs to adjust. Just last week, we actually saw the defense improve when Dre Greenlaw came back. Something, side note, that bugged the shit out of me is the announcers apparently talked to Kyle before the game because they get to ask the head coach and the quarterback questions. And they kind of asked oh, what happened this season? Kyle put it all on Dre Greenlaw. He put losing the Super Bowl on Dre Greenlaw. He was like, oh, well, when Dre went down, the Super Bowl, we couldn't win that. And I'm not saying that didn't impact things. Dre Greenlaw is an incredible player, but it's so annoying or bothersome to me that Kyle, so he basically blamed losing the Super Bowl on Dre Greenlaw and then said, oh, well, I knew we were going to start this season slow because without Dre, our defense was going to struggle. And it's like the Lions are over here missing 15 defensive players and they're finding ways to win games. They're not giving themselves automatic excuses. You're missing one guy and you're just going to throw up your hands and be like, oh, well, we're just going to suck until he comes back. Get creative. I don't know. That shit pissed me off. But anyways, run defense was awful. In the fourth quarter, they were playing soft zone coverage. This was really frustrating. At the very end, the Lions ended up scoring 2 different touchdowns this way, where they were in the end zone. And Renardo Green, who, by the way, I'm going to give him a game ball later. I thought Renardo Green, the rookies, played really well. But Amon St. Brown, who is the Lions' #1 wide receiver, This would be like someone doing this with Kittle or Debo or something. He's right here, and St. Brown is right here, and Renardo Green is like 7 yards back in the end zone, meaning if the ball goes to him, the number one wide receiver, so you can imagine that the ball might go to him. If the ball goes to him, all he has to do is walk backwards 1 foot. He gets a touchdown before this guy, who's way the fuck behind him, can come up and tackle him. Why would you play that way? Play man coverage, put your guys all along the fucking end zone. Don't put your guy. Why would they play that? I hate when defenses do that. I hate soft coverage. I hate at the end of games when you just give them a cushion 5 yards and they just walk down the field because there's no defender around them. And they were doing, I mean, I hate when you do that not in the end zone, but the idea of actually doing it in the end zone to me is fucking insane. Imagine it was the other side. Imagine Brock Purdy goes to throw the ball and the Lions defender was 10 yards away from Debo. Everyone would be like, why did you just let Debo walk in? Like, there, to me, I don't blame Renardo Green. Renardo Green, I thought, played a really good game earlier on. To me, that's coaching because you're just going in your coverage where you're assigned. It is absolutely insane to be soft zone, giving that much of a cushion when the end zone is right there. Like, they were 4th and goal. They were score a touchdown right now. Like, they weren't far away. It wasn't like he caught it and then had to run and got hella yak yards and ended up getting in the end zone. They were like 10 yards from the end zone, and all Jared Goff had to do was throw a 7-yard pass. St. Brown took 1 step backwards and scored a touchdown before Renardo Green even got there because he was so far behind him. So that shit pissed me the hell off. And that's why I'm curious with Kyle Shanahan earlier this year. He gave Nick Sorensen a lot of credit. He blamed not having Dre Greenlaw on, Nick Sorensen struggling. And I kind of fell for it because the game, Hufanga came back and Dre Greenlaw came back. I thought the 49ers took a step up in defense. I thought their defense looked better. So I was kind of falling for it. I was like, okay, maybe this is an issue of talent. Maybe Sorensen just didn't have enough talent on the defense, and it's hard to, do all this with Devondre Campbell being your starting linebacker. But now you have these guys. D. Winters was playing incredible. He's a younger guy, but he was filling in for Dre Greenlaw since Greenlaw didn't play today. He played phenomenal. Fred Warner played phenomenal. A lot of this was scheme issue. And if it's a scheme issue, that's Nick Sorensen's fault. So to me, I wonder if Nick Sorensen played himself out of a job. Like, I wonder if this one game gets Sorensen fired. And I think that some people might say, like, that's an overreaction. You can't judge a guy based on one game, especially based on the Lions, who have a top scoring offense. But I would say that's not entirely true. If the 49ers want to come back in 2025 and be competitive, if they want to win the NFC, if they want to win their division and like go back to the Super Bowl, you have to compare yourself against the Lions. The Lions are going to be, they're going to be a top offense for years to come, especially, I don't know, is Ben Johnson going to want to go somewhere this year? It'll depend on what head coaching job and, jobs end up. But to me, you want to, it's like, people who say, oh, you can't like judge a team based on playing the Chiefs because the Chiefs are so good. It's like, well, that should be the standard. Like, if the 49ers want to go to the Super Bowl, they're going to need to be able to stop the Lions or score 50. I mean, that was what it was going to take to win this game. It was either the defense need to get a stop, they need to get a turnover, or the offense was going to have to never turn over the ball and score on every single drive. And that's how by the way, up until the third quarter, that's what both teams were doing. There was no punts. There was no punts and no incompletions all the way until the second quarter. I think the first incompletion came with 3 minutes left in the second quarter. Like, almost the third quarter after halftime was the first time that either offense, by the way, was punching the ball. So both defenses were playing, or both offenses, sorry, were playing lights out, and both defenses sucked to start the game. 49ers have not gotten a turnover now in 6 games in a row, or is it 7? I think it's 6, because last week it was 5. So 49ers have not gotten a turnover. They have not won the turnover battle in 6 games in a row. And I think that that's a big issue. I think that the defensive line is a huge issue for a second. Nick Bosa, who suffered a horrible hit, he was going down like this, and actually his own teammate hit him like this, but you could see his neck crunch. He got evaluated for a concussion, but he was able to get cleared and go back in the game. They need some more talent on that defensive line. When he went out, it was horrible, and it wasn't great with him in, but he at least gave the Lions, some hesitancy, where when he wasn't in there, they were just walking straight down the field. Now, sorry, I just saw someone say, go all in for Cam Ward. We need a dog at QB, not a China doll. I am interested, I think there's no way that you pay Brock Purdy right away. Are they going to bring in a veteran quarterback and have a quarterback compete with him? For example, Carson Wentz. Are they going to try to do? I mean, I don't think that they can get Sam Darnold at this point. Sam Darnold played a hell of a game against the Packers last week. If I'm Sam Darnold, I would take less money to stay with the Vikings, because Sam has played for really bad teams and he sucked on those teams. So I think he wants to stay, with Kevin O'Connell being his play caller, with that defense, with Justin Jefferson. I think that he'd be smart to take a little bit less money and keep winning and have the possibility of getting even another contract in a couple years versus taking a higher paycheck from the Raiders or something and then sucking again. When it comes to Brock Purdy, I wonder, are the 49ers going to ask around to see if anyone would trade for him? My problem is if Brock Purdy wants 60 million, there'd have to be a team that's willing to pay him that, and a team. I mean, if I'm the 49ers, I'm not giving any. I'm saying I need 2 first-round picks. And I don't think a team's going to give you that much. So I think no matter what, you're either A, paying Brock Purdy, or B, saying, play out your contract. There's no reason to pay him this offseason. I don't know why in the NFL everyone gets paid a year early. He's under contract, and technically he could be under contract for 3 more years, because he could play out this year, and then they could franchise tag him twice if they wanted to. I don't think they'll do that, but at least play out this one last year. But going into this offseason, I mean, it'll especially be interesting to see if his elbow's healthy. If his elbow's not healthy, they're really going to need to bring in someone. Are they going to bring in a Zach Wilson? My thing with Zach Wilson is not only did he struggle just with the 5-yard pass, he was mostly a downfield thrower, but he couldn't do the easy gimme throws. But also he had a lot of attitude issues in New York. Now, what I will say is now he's the backup for Sean Payton, the Broncos. And I do respect Sean Payton. So if he sees something in him, I wonder if there's something there. Russell Wilson, I think, is a little bit old, but and even, Daniel Jones, he's been a starter for so long with the Giants that you think if there's anything there, you'd see it already. But then, when you see guys like Sam Darnold, maybe there is something to these high round. I mean, both of these guys are first round draft picks, number 1 picks, and they suck. Baker Mayfield is another example of this. Guys who suck on these horrible teams, but they go to teams with a good coach and lots of talent around him. Now, the 49ers are going to have to invest in the offensive line. When we say, oh, Sam Darnold went to the Vikings and now he's doing incredible. Yes, he has he's a great tight end. He has multiple great wide receivers, a good running back, a great head coach. He also has, Sam Darnold or Jared Goff. The Lions or the Vikings maybe tied for the best offensive lines in the NFL. And so it's no doubt in my mind why those quarterbacks are playing so much better. They actually have time to throw the ball without getting worried that their elbow's going to get broken off. But yeah, I mean, it's really going to come down to, is Brock Purdy healthy? Who are they going to bring in? Are they going to draft a pick? It'll be interesting. When do you think Cam Ward will go? I haven't heard a lot about Cam Ward. I've heard about Shedeur Sanders. I've heard that this draft class sucks and that both quarterbacks aren't very good. Apparently Sanders in a normal draft would be going second round. I've heard he's really raw and not good. but that because there's no good quarterbacks, he might go like top 3, which is kind of a Kenny Pickett scenario. Like that was just a bad draft for quarterbacks, so the Steelers totally reached on Kenny Pickett. And then, like in hindsight, it's like, why would you have drafted that guy in the first round? He was not a first round talent. Now I don't know what I'm talking about because I don't watch college football, but those are just the things that I've heard. I'll definitely this off season dive a little bit more into it, especially before the draft. But yeah. Okay, let me read some more comments. And where did this? Oh, okay. I clicked out, but I think you guys saw me. My bad. People are into this. The Cam Ward era starts now. I'll look up some Cam Ward stuff. Uh I've definitely looked into Shador Sanders. Hopefully I'm saying that right. Julie B says Dan Campbell is the real deal though. He never looked nervous once. Love his confidence and his energy. I couldn't agree more. They went for it. Oh my god, that when they went for 2 to tie the game and they got it, it was like I mean, Kyle Shanahan never does that. Kyle Shanahan barely goes for it on like 4th and 1, which are the easiest. Like you can get that just with like a quarterback push, and Kyle Shanahan almost never goes for those. Dan Campbell goes for it every single time, and I feel like I know a lot of times people say it can be reckless, but I think that installs so much confidence in your quarterback, in your team, and so when you need them to win, like think about Jimmy Garoppolo in the Super Bowl in 2019 when he didn't make that pass. If you remember that playoffs, he threw like 7 passes in the Packers game before that. He like barely did anything. So he wasn't used to being relied upon. Like he wasn't asked to do anything, and Kyle never instilled confidence in him. Kyle actually would take the ball out of his hands. And so then in the biggest moment, he wasn't like prepared, in my opinion, to live up to the moment and to kind of deal with that pressure. Where Dan Campbell, every time he'll put it on his offense and he believes that his offense is going to make it. And then they do. It's like they're the best in the league at it. But to me, it makes sense. They go for it every time. Their odds are way higher because they give themselves that opportunity. I also think he's a player's player. George Kittle talked really highly of Dan Campbell, said he's genuine and authentic, said the whole like biting the kneecaps, hard-nosed, tough-nosed football thing from an outsider can look like cringy or whatever, but when you're a player and you see that that's really who he is, like Kittle was saying what's most important, because these are grown men, they're not children. So grown men, you can look at another grown man and tell, like, are you faking it? Are you putting on a facade? And I think a lot of times with Kyle gets really nervous. He drinks a ton in big moments. Like, go back to the Super Bowl last year when he was drunk at Media Row on Monday night before the football game. To me, that shows like some insecurity, where Dan Campbell's like the opposite. Dan Campbell's like, I have my flaws, like it, love it, whatever. This is who I am, and I'm going to show up just like me. And I think players respect that. Because, like I said, Kittle, he was asked this week, and Kittle said he thinks that Dan Campbell is one of the most authentic coaches that there are, that comes off as genuine, and he has, players that are going to run through a wall for him because they know, he believes what he's saying. He's not just blowing smoke up their ass. And sometimes it feels like Kyle is putting on more of a front than actually just being himself and really believing in his team. But we need to draft a new quarterback ASAP. Connor says, by the way, if I'm missing any if I'm missing any chats, you guys can send in super chats. I'll make sure to get those. Obviously, I'll look for normal ones too. But if you want your chat read right away, or if I skip over it, feel free to send in a super chat. I would never, be upset with that. Melvin says, Happy New Year, Ashley. I love your channel. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you guys. I'm bummed that the 49ers season is almost going to be over. Last year was, much more fun when the 49ers came back and beat the Lions and they went to were in the playoffs, went to the Super Bowl. That was a little bit more fun to cover, but we're going to make it a fun offseason no matter what. We're going to look into these quarterbacks. We're going to look into the offensive linemen in this draft. There's going to be a lot of, I'm interested, like, is Kyle or the media going to start turning on John Lynch? Are they going to blame? Because if they're blaming injuries for why this season has gone wrong, then the idea is the depth behind. So the second string, third string, fourth string, those players aren't good enough, right? Well, who does that reflect on? That reflects on John Lynch. And a lot of, I would say that Kyle's actually the one who's making the picks. Kyle hired John Lynch because he was a media head. He was never, he never worked in football as a front office man. He, was a football player and obviously a damn good one, but then he was, just working for ESPN and NFL Network. And Kyle went and got him mostly to be a talking head. Kyle is the one that does a lot of the draft picks that, have seemingly not turned out well at all. But I wonder, like, are they going to turn on each other? Is there going to be some media narratives where they're pointing the blame? Because Adam Peters, who used to be head of football operations and dealt with the scouting department for the 49ers, he's now in Washington, and Washington looks great this year. They've turned their entire franchise that was like a dumpster fire with that freaking owner and their stadium flooding and all that shit literally 1 year ago. And now they're in the playoffs and look great. So it'll be interesting. Do Kyle and John Lynch, do we start hearing murmurs? And if, Kyle isn't fired, are they going to try to put off blame on Nick Sorensen and they're going to fire him? Obviously, they have to fire Brian Schneider, the special teams coordinator. They have to cut Jake Moody. But are they going to look at the defensive coordinator? Are they going to look at the GM? Are they going to take some power away from Kyle and say, hey, Kyle, we're not going to fire you yet. You can still be the coach. But when it comes to the draft, you can't be the one, picking the first round anymore. You can't be spending third round picks on a kicker. I sent it to my dad, but Kyle was asked about Jake Moody before the game, one of the announcers, and about him missing kicks. And the guy was like, what do you say to Jake Moody to install confidence in him and, make sure he can go out and make his next kick? Kyle, apparently, this is what the announcer said, and they said that they were quoting him. Kyle said that he doesn't know what to say to kickers, and he told Jake Moody that he just needs to make it. What? You can't be a head coach. Kyle thinks he's an offensive coordinator. Does he not know that head coach means it means you have to oversee the special teams, you have to oversee the defense, you have to channel the emotions. By the way, Jawan Jennings was like getting in fights on the field, which I love Jennings. But like you have to channel the emotions of your players. You have to like oversee the entire football team. It is more than just your offense. By the way, their offense is not good enough if that's all he's focusing on. But I couldn't believe that he just came out and said, oh, I don't know much about kickers. But I should be able to believe it because when they drafted Jake Moody with the third round pick, which by the way, most kickers are undrafted and they're playing way better than Jake Moody is. No one spends that high of a draft pick on a kicker because you get them in the last round and they're just as good or better. And when asked, why did you spend this third round pick on this kicker? He basically said that he doesn't like to watch kicker tape. He gave Brian Schneider, the special teams guy, full autonomy, and Brian Schneider came to him after narrowing it down and showed Kyle some highlights of Jake Moody and then said, we should draft this guy. And Kyle just said, okay. And then when they drafted him, he was like, hopefully I never have to watch kicker tape again. Well, Kyle, you're going to have to watch kicker tape way sooner than you wanted to because that kicker needs to go. Needs to go. Anyways. See, this is not true. Ace 209 says, well, you're behind, so you have no choice but to throw. Well, I have multiple issues with this. One, they started throwing the 16 straight passes they started doing when they were up by 12 points. So 49ers were winning the game. I might actually have the exact, they were 21-13. So 49ers were literally winning when they started this. And then Jake Moody had his 2 missed field goals, mixed extra point, and then Brock Puddy had his 2 interceptions. So they were winning, first of all. And second of all, when you're only down, like, you only have to really start throwing the ball if it's like crunch time and you're down 2 touchdowns. If you have an entire quarter and by the time they were down, I think it was going into the fourth quarter, they were down by 12, I think in the end of the third quarter. You can absolutely still run the ball and you absolutely should run the ball. You don't need to run the ball every single down, but you need to run it sometimes because that's how play action works. If you look yesterday at the Minnesota Vikings, who by the way destroyed the Packers, they run the ball so that play action works. If you looked at the Rams game earlier this week, that game was an ugly ass game. I think they won like 12-6 or something. It was an ugly game. And the Rams were losing. So what you're saying that you have to do, the Rams were losing and they kept running the ball. And that's what got them ahead. Because when you run the ball, then the defense has to come up a little bit because they're trying to stop the run. That opens up the back, and then you can throw it with play action. Play action does not work if you're only running or only passing. You have to do both so that you can trick the opposing defense. So this is wrong, especially because, and I think I have the stats, the run game was also working. Like maybe if you're getting negative yard every single time, like sometimes they've tried to force the run with Debo and he's been horrible, but let me read off these stats. Okay, I have a bunch of Purdy stats and wide receiving stats, but we'll go back to those. Isaac Rendo, he only had 9 carries. Horrible. He's the starting running back, only had 9 carries. That is not even. I mean, the 49ers offense, let me look at this really quick. Jared Goff threw for 300 yards, and the Lions ran the ball for 152 yards. The Lions, you're saying that you can't run when you're behind. The Lions ran for 152 yards. The Lions were behind. The thing that you're saying that you have to throw. The Lions were behind for 3/4 of the game. So during those 3/4, they continued to run the ball. So I don't know what the hell you're talking about. Because the Lions, who were losing, they were behind for the first 3/4, ran the ball for 152 yards. And that's how they won. So first, they threw for 300 yards, which is a lot, but it's 77 yards less than Brock Purdy. So they threw the ball less. Brock Purdy threw the ball for 377 yards. By the way, and then Josh Jobs came in. He only threw the ball too. He threw the ball for 35 yards. So in total, the 49ers offense passed for 412 yards. And they only ran the ball for 75. That's not balanced football. That's horrible. What a balanced football game is 300 for throwing, 300 in the air. Like you said, they were down, so they're throwing a little bit more, but still 152 yards rushing. That's how you get defenses off guard because you're switching it up. You don't just throw every single time because then your quarterback ends up getting sacked and now can't move his arm and it's apparently on fire and he might not play next week. But yeah, absolutely insane that the 49ers only ran for 75 yards. By the way, like that's just bad play calling. Isaac Rendo got 75 yards on one play like 2 games ago. If you get him out to the sideline, which is how you should use Isaac Rendo because he's not a bruising back, he's not a downhill runner, and Kyle should know this by now. If fans know this, Kyle should know the skill set of his own running back. Isaac Rendo, they didn't do any bounce out routes for him, but he still averaged 3.8 yards per carry. Then Debo was actually effective as a running back for the first time ever. He only had 3 carries, but it was for 16 yards. He averaged 5.5 yards or 5.4 yards per carry. And then Brock Puddy himself scrambled 3 times for 12 yards, averaging 4 yards a carry. There's no reason that they don't do that more. Brock Purdy, they won that Tampa game because Brock Purdy utilized his legs. Because Isaac Rendo had a 71, one of his multiple carries, he had a 75-yard touchdown in that game. So I don't agree with what you're saying. Obviously, you have to throw the ball slightly more when you're losing. The 49ers weren't losing until the very end, and they were airing the ball out before. That's what got them in trouble. Like, when they were winning is when they started throwing too much, and that's when they turned the ball over twice. Anyways, that was just upsetting. Now, let me see. What was that? Because I do want to highlight there were some positives in the receiving game. Ricky Pearsall, the rookie, had his breakout game. He had an incredible game. He had 8 receiving catches for 141 yards. That's 18 yards per catch. That's really good. That's like what, obviously it's only one game, but that's what Brandon Ayuk did last year that got him paid his big ass contract. So great game from Ricky. But even with that, like what really frustrates me, if you go back, there was an entire month, an entire 4 games that Ricky Pearsall did not get a catch. He just he had an excellent game. He showed that if he's targeted, he can catch the ball and he can get yards after the carry and he can get first downs and he can get third downs. Why did you not in the meaningful games? Like, why is your breakout game after the season is over? Kyle, why are you so against rookies that you didn't target he's your first round draft pick? Absolutely insane. Right behind him, very similar stats. George Kittle, clearly, I've been saying Kittle needs way more targets. He got 8 catches for 114 yards. He averaged 14 yards a catch. Incredible. And then Juwan Jennings was the third leading wide receiver with 7 catches, averaging 10 yards per catch. Now, Deebo Samuel was not on there, but I won't complain too much. He obviously sucked as a wide receiver, but I'm just glad instead of trying to force feed it to him when it's not working, Kyle did spread the ball around to Ricky Pearsall and to George Kittle and Juwan Jennings, the 3. I think Jennings has been probably the best running back since last December. George Kittle, obviously Hall of Fame career. He's had one of his best seasons this season, which sucks that the team as a whole, like he doesn't get as much credit for it because the team is losing, but he's had basically a star game every time he's targeted. And then Ricky Pearsall having his breakout game. So those are 3, I'm very glad that those guys were targeted and it wasn't just force fed to Deebo Samuel like it sometimes is. For example, the Rams game that actually they needed to win. Why did they wait until, why didn't they do this against the Rams? In the first quarter of this game, Brock Purdy had thrown the ball just the first quarter. This opened up, but just the first quarter, Brock Purdy had targeted 5 different people in the passing game alone. Against the Bears, they had a similar stat. It was 7. In both the games that their offense has looked dominant, they had play action, which by the way, you need to run and pass to have play action work, but they had play action rollout, misdirection, and they targeted more than 3 wide receivers. In the games that they've lost, they've consistently they've locked onto one guy, whether that was Christian McCaffrey or Deebo Samuel. They've overfed one guy, and defenses can cue in on that guy and then halt the offense. And it's not working. And then everyone's like, oh, well, they just had a bad game. And it's like, yeah, they had a bad game. At the same time, Kyle, why are you continuing to make that your number 1 target when it's not working? Now, I can understand feeding the hot hand if last year when they were going to Christian McCaffrey a lot, but Christian McCaffrey was averaging 7 yards per carry. It's like, okay, you're hot, do it. But then, by the way, he got hurt later on in the season and was averaging under 3 yards, and they were still force feeding him. And it's like, no, if the hot hand isn't working, don't go back to it. Open up your offense. You are paying all these guys. You're paying all these stars. Why are you just force feeding it to one player? That makes it easy for defenses to just cue in on. Very annoying. I'm going to go back to this. Hard pill to swallow after going to the Super Bowl twice in the last I know, new Dallas Cowboys. I'm hoping not. I'm hoping that they don't marry themselves to Brock Purdy this offseason. And I'm not saying Brock Purdy's bad. I just want him to give us another year. Maybe next year, they can bolster up this offensive line and he plays a little better. He has 2, incredible years and 1 down year, then I'm willing to say that maybe you can stick with him. But if he levels out from here and he's just average, you can't lock up an average quarterback to top 5 quarterback money. how do you build around him in that instance? But yeah. Oh, okay. Let me see what else people are talking about. Jed York, not a great trade. Bosa, I disagree. Bosa, I think, really showed what he was worth this game. Um, the money isn't in the salary cap, so it doesn't matter. Should be on coaching unless there's deeper beef. I don't. Do you mean like maybe I'm missing something? Clarify. I don't know what you're talking about. Brock Purdy's money isn't on the salary cap? Yes, it is. Kyle Shanahan, if that's what you're asking, coaching does not go to the salary cap, but Jed York in general is cheap. So I don't think he would want to pay for another coach. Now, the one thing with the way that coaching or like coach's salary works is right now, the Yorks are paying Kyle Shanahan 14 million. But if he were to go to another team, like another team immediately hired him, which everyone says you can't fire Kyle because a team will immediately hire him, that team will have to pick up his salary. So then the 49ers are off the hook and they can pay a different coach with that. If that's, I don't know if you're talking about Kyle or not, but if you are, that is how his contract works. I'm trying to read through the comments, see if there's anything else I'm missing. I think someone said Kyle is his own worst enemy. I agree. I mean, just the fact that he was so creative to start this game, it's like, why? Like, why are you showing that now? Like, it almost makes me more frustrated. Like, I'd rather he just lost it than to know that you had this in the bag. Like, you could call a creative offense. You could play disciplined football up until the fourth quarter. My dad and I were joking about it. We're like, who is this 49ers team? They weren't committing penalties. They were like playing disciplined football. They were executing. Now, like I said, maybe some of that is just like the Lions defense really sucks, so it makes the 49ers offense look better. But the committing penalties thing, that doesn't have anything to do with the Lions. That's just on the 49ers. They've been worse. They've been like bottom 10 in committing penalties all year. They've sucked, like constantly beating themselves. Up until the fourth quarter, they committed, I think, one penalty, and then all of a sudden in the fourth quarter, they committed like four back to back. And it's like that's how you lose. That's how you lose football games. I have a feeling this offseason is going to be wild regarding Kyle and John Lynch, especially if Brock is hurt this offseason. I mean, that's really the monkey, the wrench that got thrown into this situation that no one was expecting. Like, I thought the 49ers were going to lose. I didn't think it was going to happen like this. Like, now there's been reports. Tim Kawakami came out. He's obviously worked with the 49ers, been a beat reporter for a long time. And apparently Jed York and his family have, denied reports that there's any hot seat and said, basically Kyle and John Lynch are here to stay. But 2 weeks ago, Kyle said that Nick Sorensen was here to stay. And after this performance, when he was asked about it, he didn't say Nick Sorensen was going to get fired, but he didn't speak as confidently. Same thing with Jake Moody. Like, Kyle Shanahan was kissing Jake Moody's ass literally 3 days ago. I think that was a Thursday practice, or first Thursday press conference this week. And then after this week, you're thinking maybe he's going to get fired. So people can give a vote of confidence, but if there's really embarrassing losses like this, you can't just like close your eyes and be like, la, 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 we're just going to do the same thing next season and think that we're going to win. Like, what's that? The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again. There needs to be wholesale changes. And some of that is with the personnel. Like, they need to get a lot younger. They need to let go of some of these veterans that are aging, that are injured, constantly dealing with injury. By the way, I did report earlier this week because, like I said, game ball goes to Ricky Pearsall. And then also, I thought Renardo Green played really well. Both rookies had an excellent game. Renardo Green was starting on the other side of Deommodore Lenoir because Charvarius Ward missed this game. And I did, if you guys watched my video yesterday, the final day before this game, it was reported that Charvarius Ward was going to miss the game, and it was with personal news. Obviously, he had the devastating personal news earlier this year where he lost a child. He actually, his significant other had a baby today. So my prayers go out to Travarius Ward and to his family, and I'm super happy that his family has some good news after some, really hard times. Kyle did, or I think it was Matt Mayoko did say that it was good news yesterday, but I'm glad to know that that's why he was out and it was nothing, he's not injured and it was nothing bad. But they're going to have to move off of him anyways because he's going to be too expensive and getting a new contract. I don't think they'll move off of Nick Bosa, but they need to move off of Hargrave. I think, Leonard Floyd, I don't know if he's worth the money. Like, even these guys that are doing decent, like, you need guys who are actually, making an impact. When it comes to the linebackers, Fred Warner is going to be up for a contract, and it's interesting because he's playing through that injury, and I think he's playing through that because they kind of set the precedent when they paid Christian McCaffrey last offseason and Trent Williams. They set this precedent that even if your contract's not over, if you just hold out, they're going to pay you. But I don't know right now if I want to pay anyone until they're healthy. Like, I think when you're coming off a bad year, you should just be like, if you're on a contract, we're playing one more year. And if they do good next year, okay, we're going to pay you. If not, like, we're moving off of you. If you're older, they can't just keep giving out money to guys who are, dealing with injury. Even when you look at Trent Williams, like, they need to have backups because Trent Williams had to go see a specialist because he's broken his ankle so many times. It's not healing right anymore. Aaron Banks, his contract's over. You can't bring him back. He's not good enough. So they're going to have to draft defensive linemen, like a DN on the other side of Nick Bosa. I think they're going to be okay for corner right now, but they're going to need probably another, maybe, later round running backs, later round wide receiver. And if a good quarterback does fall to them, I wouldn't be completely opposed to making it a competition. It doesn't mean like you absolutely have to move off of Brock Purdy, but it is telling Brock Purdy like it's not 100% your job. And to me, the 49ers are about that. Like, think of Joe Montana, arguably the best quarterback of all time, had Steve Young sitting behind him. Like, it's not the franchise's job to make everyone feel like totally calm and safe. Like, no, you need to perform. And obviously you want to instill confidence in your player, but that doesn't mean giving them a blank slate if they suck. Like, no, if you're constantly in fourth quarter turning the ball over, this is now the third game in a row that Brock Purdy has had an interception within 2 minutes of the game being over. Like, you can't do that without feeling a little pressure. I think at least they need to bring a veteran into camp. If he's injured, they need to, like, it'll depend, because if he's like really injured, they might want to invest in like a more expensive player who can actually play, not just give, but even if he's not injured, to me, you need to bring someone in, not necessarily that they're going to win the job, but that they at least make it a competition this offseason. And I wouldn't sign anyone to more than a 1-year deal, because if they do lose, like the team does poorly next season, then I think you want to move off of Kyle, and you want whoever the new coach you hire, you want them to be able to decide if they want to keep Brock Purdy or not. So that's why I'm thinking everyone, one-year deal. Let's redo. If everyone wants to blame injuries, which I think is way more than injuries, but if everyone wants to say it's injuries, we're going to give you guys one more opportunity. And then we're going to decide if we keep Kyle. If not, if it's a new head coach, he might want to turn over the roster. And I would give him that, you want to be able to give your coach that opportunity. But anyways, I do think that's going to be it tonight. It was a later night game, so I don't want to keep you guys up too long. I will be going live tomorrow. I know it's New Year's Eve, but I will be going live tomorrow with Sports Illustrated Tom Jensen. I might go live a little bit earlier just because it's New Year, so I, maybe want to do stuff. But in between 2 and 3, I'll go live after Kyle talks. It'll be interesting. Normally he talks on Monday because the game's on Sunday. And so normally he talks at 3:30 on Monday. I wonder if he'll talk tomorrow earlier because, one, it's a home game, so they don't have to travel home. But I'm going to be really interested in seeing the results of whatever imaging Brock Purdy has. So I definitely want to give you guys an update on that. We'll talk about the offseason. We'll talk about the upcoming Arizona game. I hope Brock plays. I'm supposed to be going to that game. So yeah. Anyways, I hope you guys had a great holiday season. Make sure to give your family lots of love. By the way, my dad is watching, but people commented on my last stream and wished him luck because I told everyone he was having some like jaw surgery, which he told me he was having, but then it ended up getting pushed back. So for all you guys who were wishing my dad good luck, I really appreciate you. He's gonna have it next month now, but I'll tell him that you guys wish him good luck and health, and I'll give him an extra hug, coming into this new year for everyone. But I really appreciate you guys. Give me a comment, give me a like. Make sure to subscribe. Going live with, like I said, Tom tomorrow. Day after that, going live with Connor Whalen, also from Sports Illustrated. I did that last week, and a lot of you guys seem to like that stream as well. So bringing you all the content, and then I'll be going to Arizona, bringing you guys that content too. Thank you guys so much. I appreciate. I see Dank, Julie B. I see I'm 27. All you guys, I really appreciate you guys. Thank you so much and have a wonderful night. Bye, guys.